Now, the god who gives birth to Hanuman, I'm sure many of you know in the Valmiki Ramayana, is Vayu, who is himself a kind of middleman. He's the element of air, of which I wish we had a little bit more right now. He's the in-between element, between heaven and earth, filling all of space. He's prana, the vital breath. But of course, in later tradition, and I know most of you know this, it's not really Vayu who is the sole progenitor of Hanuman. Of course, Hanuman is known as Maruti, Vayu Putra, Pavana Sutta, Pavana Kumar, all these names that mean the son of the wind. But in many later traditions, it's not really Vayu. Vayu himself is only the intermediary who transports the seed of a much greater deity to Anjana and causes her to become pregnant, and that is, of course, Shiva. Right? So in the Hanuman Chalisa we say Shankara Subhana Kesari Nandana. Right? Right? So he is Shankara Subhana, the son of Shiva, and he's considered to be the 11th Rudra, the Yadavan Rudra avatar. And this is a tradition that's at least 1,300 years old or so. It's not anything new in terms of finding textual evidence for it. And it's very pervasive all over India. In the West, when I tell people this, they're surprised because they say, but Hanuman is a Vaishnava deity, if they know something about Hinduism. He's a Vaishnava deity. How can he be Shiva? Well, once again, he's the middleman who brings together, who bridges the divide and brings together the gulfs, crosses a gulf. Vaishnava and Shaiva are, of course, not the kind of airtight compartments that a lot of Westerners imagine them to be. But Hanuman is one of the important deities who stands astride that distinction. Next. So that in many Shiva temples, especially up north, you find Hanuman present right there in the shrine, as in this picture. Yeah. So he represents the virya in men and the power, that kind of Shakti power in men from Shiva, but he also, of course, is Shakti in the feminine sense as well. And so Hanuman is often found with the Devi as one of her attendants or part of her entourage, and many Devis have a very close relationship with Hanuman. Hanuman and sometimes Bhairava as well, as you see in this poster. This is Vaishnava Devi. So in his association with men and strength and virility, Hanuman, of course, becomes the patron deity of athletes and wrestlers, and especially pahalvans and akharas, and the traditional kinds of wrestling and other martial arts. And you usually have a little shrine to Hanuman in an akhara, and even the worship of the pit and the mitti in the pit as a kind of an embodiment of him, in the form of him. Next. But of course, he's also associated with yoga, and with what the scholar R.C. Zeno once translated as athletes of the spirit, yogis. We use that translation. I think it's very beautiful. Athletes of the spirit, because Hanuman is immortal, and he's considered to have all the siddhas, and so he's a practitioner of yoga and very much a figure for worship in the yoga traditions as well. Now, in yoga traditions, you have that side of Hinduism that aims for self-perfection and for immortality and physical immortality, and the metaphors are all very solid. The idea of a vajra deha, a diamond-like body, which is immortal and impervious to death and illness, and very powerful, and that's a kind of self-made body. And Hanuman is very much emblematic of that himself. Next image. He is understood to be one of the Sapta Chiranjeevis, one of the 7 immortals of mythology, and he's always thought to be living somewhere in the Himalayas, and you have poster art that visualizes him kind of in retirement in the Himalayas, but you know that whenever the Ramayana story is told, he's always there. He always comes and is present somewhere. Okay, next. He manifests the Siddha-like qualities in his various exploits, especially in Sundarakand, growing larger and smaller, and so forth. Yeah, next slide. And in some modern poster art, he becomes a kind of a Rambo-like muscle man, or you could say a Rambo, maybe, with these incredible, Arnold Schwarzenegger or nowadays Hrithik Roshan kind of abs and so forth. He looks like he works out at God's gym. And he, of course, also becomes a kind of poster child for militant Hinduism. And next image, you have his associations with the BJP and the BHP and the Bajrang Dal, which is part of the BHP, and his association with communal violence in some contexts. Hanuman is invoked as a vengeful and aggressive deity for Hindus. But if you go back just a little way, you don't find this to be very much of a dominant theme in his worship. Because equally commonly, Hanuman is depicted as an extremely emotional deity. And this is where the bhakti side comes in. And unlike the Shakti side, in the Bhakti side, the metaphors are not of solidity, the metaphors are all of liquidity. They're all of water, fluid, and liquidness. Love is imagined as very wet. You have rivers of love and lakes of devotion and people shedding tears. And the idea is not to make your body immortal and diamond-like, but to let your ego melt and surrender yourself to the Lord. And Hanuman is equally becomes an emblem of that as well, this kind of self-surrender, self-giving love. So it's a paradox. Do you want to have your cake and eat it too? You can be immortal and self-actualized and powerful, but at the same time be emotional and have an open heart. Hanuman literally has an open heart, as you know, in many pictures. And giving of yourself, and he is the person in whom this kind of paradoxical ideal comes together. Next. We often see him dancing in ecstasy before a murti of Ram with kartals in his hand and doing nam jap and so on. We all know that. Yeah. Yes, what was that? Yes, that's just showing you the kind of two sides. That's Shakti side on the left. It's a typical Vijayanagar Tamacha Hanuman delivering a slap, Vijayanagar period image, and on the right, of course, the famous rending of the chest image. Yeah. Hanuman also has a very human-like life story because he is immortal. He becomes immortal, but he starts out with a birth and everything, and so he has a life narrative that is like a human life narrative. And in modern times, he even has autobiographies. I've collected 2 in Hindi, Atmakathas, in which Hanuman tells his own story, which is something that's very difficult to imagine Rama doing. But Hanuman is more like us, and we can imagine him talking to us in a folksy, chatty voice and reminiscing about his own life. And there's been a very spiraling literature about Hanuman in the 20th century, which is part of what I trace in my larger study. Yeah. Including, of course, the cartoon that I'm sure many of you saw that was India's first feature-length animated cartoon that came out in